How'd you do a bridge, Karen?
How'd I do?
What did I do with my iPad?
That's exactly right, that it needs to be referred to Ray. That's right. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, November 8th. First up, we have discussions on Ordinance 0073-2021.
I believe that's mine for the TIRC, Tax Center Review Commission, Councilwoman. As noted in the report, this is the annual report of our Tax Center Review Commission. It met in August to review the incentives and TIFs related to the operations of economic development activities within the city of Gahanna. As noted, all recommendations from the TIRC are contingent upon council adoption. What's being brought to you today are the minutes of that meeting, status reports of the TIFs themselves. All were found to be in compliance with the existing agreements for the city of Gahanna based on a previously benchmarked job creation numbers, payroll jobs, etc. So what I need from the council this evening is an adoption of that minutes so I can be filed with the state auditor as well as county auditor's office.
Okay. Any questions? Okay.
Hi, Director Strum, thank you, and thank you for the minutes being appended here. It was wonderful to read through those and see how the director actually, how that gets presented to the auditor's office, so thank you. A question that I had is that each of the abated properties
Yes.
in this report were all businesses, commercial properties, right?
That's correct.
Are we, do we have abated residential properties in CRAs, and how are those evaluated, if at all?
Sure. So from a CRA standpoint, yes, we do have residential CRAs in the city. Most of those are what are called pre-94 CRAs, so they're not necessarily reported to the auditor's office as they're filing once annually. We do the same inspections, so we operate and make sure that they're occupied, they're in good repair. There don't have any code violations on them, things of that nature. And we have no outstanding issues with any of our residential CRAs within the city.
Okay, but no, and this will be a question maybe for tomorrow too, but there's no mechanism for determining economic development or business spending because of a residential abatement?
So there is. The city has its own separate board. The acronym that it has is escaping me right now.
Crack board.
Thank
Okay.
you. The crack board.
You gotta change that.
We gotta change that acronym. But that board is the one that actually evaluates on a local level the statuses of the various housing CRAs, the abatements, what the spending capacities are for those sites, and what their impacts have been to the community.
Okay.
And that meets annually in December, I believe.
And you are the facilitator for that board?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. All right, thank
And
you.
you appoint the members of that board. You and the mayor have a joint appointment to those boards.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Are TIFs included in the idea of going out, for instance, to a residential area to do some kind of infrastructure?
Yes, we do have residential TIFs in the city.
That's good to know. Thank you.
If I may follow up on that, you'll note in the reports that were included that we had staff reports that were provided to the auditor's office.
Yes.
Northern Triangle is considered a residential TIF because the predominance of the properties within it are noted as being residential. Manor TIF is in there. There's maybe one or two other TIFs within the city that are residential that are producing, and those reports are filed with my status report as well as the minutes.
Thank you.
All right, so are you okay? Any other questions? Okay, so we can have this on for first reading. No need to come back consent agenda on the next meeting? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay. Next, department update. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. A short time ago, I believe the mayor sent over a report on the division's third quarter goals and objectives, and I'm going to give you a brief summary of where we are to date as far as the department. The report forwarded by the mayor to council is compiled quarterly. We began annual goal setting and reporting in this format about 3 years ago. Our objective as a leadership team within the division is to lead by strategic objective rather than by crisis and chaos, which is often what we find when we're dealing with calls for service. Goals and objectives are formulated in the fourth quarter of the previous year, and we're working on those as we speak, and presented to the agency's employees in our first quarter in service, which is generally in January of every year. Input is taken from all levels of the agency, community feedback, surveys, in-person meetings, such as the Chiefs Monthly meeting that I host, and also from city leadership and Director Wynn. Tonight's report is really independent of crime and traffic data. We try to cover that extensively in our monthly bulletins to the community, as well as the division's annual report. I'm happy to say that Gahanna continues to be a safe and welcoming community. So with that, division's strategic goals: provide safe travel for motorists and pedestrians throughout the city of Gahanna, pursue excellence in our service delivery and be a recognized leader in policing, recruit, hire, develop, and promote a professionally trained workforce to deliver exceptional police services, reduce the rate or fear of crime through preventative efforts and impartial enforcement of the law, and finally, engage in an authentic and transparent community partnership. Within the report, you'll find over 80 identifiable and measurable outcomes of division activity. Through this effort, we provide a written work plan, purpose, and direction to our staff. Just of note, due to the pandemic, some of our division goals and objectives have been deferred. An example of that is the start of this year's Citizen Police Academy. We began advertising for the Citizen Police Academy to start that class in September. Unfortunately, as we were ramping up our efforts to promote that class was right when the COVID numbers started to spike again in August. So we've deferred that objective. Significant projects that are impacting the division's or operations that correspond to budget items in 2021 include the ongoing co-location of the division's communication center, the rollout of Smart 911 to the Gahanna community, the planned upgrade, and I spoke about this at last week's meeting, of our 911 call handling software, the deployment of body-worn cameras to all sworn officers of the division. That is complete. We also, as part of that package and part of that initiative, rolled out new in-car features to our officers and their mobile data computers. And we just rolled out a new redaction software that will help us comport with the many requirements of the Ohio Revised Code when it comes to the handling of body-worn video. We continue to work on addressing staffing shortages and making improvements, and really this is an ongoing process of making improvements to our division's hiring process. Next week, we'll have our first successful hires of our lateral entry program that will bring experienced, certified, and deployable sworn officers to an abbreviated field training program. We standardized division-issued firearms. We did that in very short order this past year. Our ongoing scheduled fleet and radio replacements, that program is ongoing, and we are planning for a platform upgrade of our portable radios in early 2023. Implementation of the peer assistance team, working in collaboration with five other suburban agencies. Those include Whitehall, Grove City, Hilliard, Dublin, and Reynoldsburg. We hosted some training here that was provided free of charge through the Department of Justice to those agencies and those team members. Our team consists of 10 members who are now fully trained and meet the Ohio Revised Code requirements for peer assistance team. Ongoing work with in officer mental wellness initiatives. This work ultimately results in fewer excessive use of force incidents and contributes to the overall expectations of a modern, progressive policing agency. Again, we have a lot of focus on critical incident team training, de-escalation, and the like with our staff, making sure that 100% of our staff are fully CIT trained. Excuse me, other highlights of this year include the training of staff in 4 blocks of in-service training focusing on wellness, crisis intervention and de-escalation, critical policy reviews such as use of force and pursuits, legal updates, state mandates, and critical skill requirements. Critical incident reviews and critical stress debriefs are occurring in all major incidents. We just had one over the weekend. This is a documented multi-step process. Continue to work toward national accreditation through the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, or CALEA. The accreditation program institutes over 450 standards of compliance. Audits, plans, inventories, reviews, reports, and significant documentation requirements are all time sensitive and are all a part of that accreditation process. It's really, as you've heard me say multiple times, the gold standard of policing that less than 15% of law enforcement agencies nationwide achieve. We've integrated a qualified and trained domestic violence crime victim advocate. We've completed a facility and police programming needs assessment, which closely mirrors the projected outcomes of one completed in 2005. We've conducted several policing and criminal justice reform meetings to develop a unified strategies with key stakeholders, especially in the area of juvenile crime. Stakeholders such as faith leaders, community activists, educators, judges, youth representatives, and grassroots organizations such as the South Linden Area Commission and Mothers of Columbus Murdered Children. Some of our community engagement activities include addressing neighborhood traffic complaints through a hands-on, data-driven approach to include the publishing of survey results, direct follow-up on actionable issues, and feedback to community members. That's been a source of many compliments from affected residents. We believe this to be a more cost-effective and holistic approach to neighborhood traffic concerns rather than more costly measures such as traffic calming devices. They're often limited in effectiveness and sometimes create unwanted consequences. We've brought a return of community events, coffee with a cop, shop with a cop, self-defense classes, several group presentations. We've returned to in-person monthly meetings, and of course we had National Night Out. Another thing of great enjoyment from our community members and also our officers is we partnered with the Starfish Assignment, providing books to school children and reading opportunities in classroom settings to foster positive youth-focused interactions with our officers. And also our staff. When I mention a lot about officers, but I don't want to forget our civilian support staff and also our dispatchers, because they play key roles in all of these programs. Upcoming items of note: currently drafting a comprehensive memorandum of understanding that will be entered in with Mifflin Township and the Regional Council of Governments regarding the co-location of the city's communication center at 400 West Johnstown. The hiring of 4 police recruits that will attend the 137th class of the Columbus Police Academy. They will graduate in July of 2022, and we should realize them at the end of 2022. Preparing for the go-live of the new communication center. Again, we spoke about that last week. Completing work on the 2021 workload-based staffing assessment. Last year's is online, and we'll have a new one this year. We're actually working on formatting it, and we'll also be adding some components related to our response times. Ongoing work with council, city administration, and community members, and the outcomes of the next step of the facility and programming needs assessment. We're working on the completion of our 2022 training plan. The state has reinstituted continuing professional training requirements to all agencies in the state, so we'll be integrating those requirements into our training plan. In 2022, we'll begin identifying the necessary critical functions for a new computer-aided dispatch and records management system that will lead us to the creation of an RFP and RFQ process as the division's current CAD and RMS system reaches end of life. It's been in use by us for the last 17 years. So that will be a multi-year project that will begin in 2022. And then the final thing is the implementation of the next phase of the division's wellness initiative for all of our members. And with that, are there any questions? Can you have the report in front of you with all the goals and objectives and the metrics to date? So if there are any questions related to those, please let me know.
Chief, I just want to say thank you very much for this detailed report, and just comment on the fact of all the activities that you've done throughout 2021, most notably on the last two items, to reduce the rate of fear or fear of crime through our prevention efforts, and then also engage with authentic and transparency in our community. I deeply thank you with your constant adherence to the details about customers or residents who actually respond and need us. You come out at all hours to community meetings, and I really deeply appreciate all that you've done. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to, real quick, see if the director, if I hit everything. All right, sir.
Yeah, Chief, I'd like to echo some of Mr. Renner's sentiments, having taken the Citizen Police Academy and enjoyed the night out with the police officers and attended many of the chief's meetings, those kind of things. I will tell you, speaking to people in the community, those things go a long way. Getting to know our officers, getting to know our SROs, that type of thing. So, again, appreciate you and all you and yours for all that you guys do. So, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
If there aren't any other questions?
Mayor?
Thank you very much for allowing us to give a presentation, just a discussion update tonight from the Department of Public Safety. Earlier this evening, when I sent the third quarter report for goals and objectives for 2021 for the division, I noted in there that going forward, we are going to schedule with certainly the deference of council leadership, periodic updates from various departments to give an opportunity to provide a little bit more detail. I know I provide a very detailed written mayor's report, but I also understand that the methods of communication that we have had from council and administration have really changed significantly over the past year and a half. You know, we started off 2020, and before we knew it, we were talking to each other for a computer screen for the next 15 or 16 months or so. And then we came back here, and where we used to be in the committee room, where it was like talking across the dining room table and an informal dialogue, we are instead in here so that we can live stream these meetings as well, which is still great to have that opportunity. And I thoroughly appreciate the transparency and allowing residents to view these from the safety and comfort of their own home. However, that informality that we used to have in the committee room for conversation kind of dissipates once we're in this big chambers. So in the spirit of trying to, again, create some more informal dialogue and provide you with more detailed updates with your deference, we'll be adding these periodically to Committee of the Whole updates as we go forward. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, if there's nothing else on with the agenda, we, in reference to an email that we received a little while ago, I don't see Mr. Moorhead here, but Mr. Crawford, we received an email about a study that was done by URS, sanitary study. Can you address that? Why that study is not valid for the assessment on the sewers at Pinnacle Point?
Mr. Moorhead here to help answer that, being the city engineer. He can provide that detailed information that you're likely looking for.
Okay, I'd like an answer to why that study is not sufficient for satisfying this issue that's been going on for years.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay.
Can we have that by our next committee meeting, or?
We could definitely have that by next committee meeting. We actually received that email, which I believe was sent a week ago, just a few days ago. We actually had a long conversation with the city attorney today, walking through that assessment. I believe Mr. Moorhead is the best person to speak to that in depth, and we can certainly arrange for him to be here at the next committee meeting and have that discussion.
And I guess, speaking of emails, I guess we got one this afternoon. Ms. Bowers, do you want to address the email we got this afternoon, or could you be prepared to address it at some point?
Absolutely, yeah. I have, I'm happy to address questions posed by constituents. I'm also happy to discuss this issue with my colleagues. I'm also happy to talk about it with Mr. Malarski. So I I have information compiled. I'm happy to share it with you. There were no mistakes made on these applications. They do not affect my ability to perform my role here. And I'm happy to discuss that with you. It's not on the agenda for tonight.
Yeah. No,
I think that, and I'll leave it at that.
okay.
Any other? Okay, we're adjourned. Michael, you're up.
Crystal, just let me know when you're ready for finance.
I'm ready when you are.
Okay, so with that, let's commence Finance Committee meeting for November 8th, 2021. We just have one discussion item on the agenda, however, it's a doozy. Ordinance 0072, 2021. I won't read the whole thing. Basically, this is the administration's budget request for fiscal year 2022. Before we dive into discussions, I'll just add a couple of housekeeping items. Council received a copy of the budget a couple of weeks ago. I know it does take some time to digest the material. The process that we essentially agreed to follow this year mirrors what we did last year, where in advance of our committee discussions, we would submit the questions to the administration to allow them to go back and look at the various pages or exhibits on various pages and do their homework and then come back prepared to have a fruitful discussion. So the process tonight is very much a bit of a fact-finding portion of this process. So I have a list of questions that I've received to date. I will read those. I will ask the administration to kind of weigh in, and then if there is any follow-up discussion, I'll just take them as they come from members of council. So,
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir.
I am sorry. It has been a long-standing tradition, and I just wanted to understand what your take on it. Especially since we're in council chambers.
Yes, sir.
But when we've had new electeds, we've invited them to the table to be part of budget discussions. With the format and how we're set up, I'm not exactly sure this is conducive to that, but I wondered if you had thought about that, and is there a way that we can actually have our new electeds at least part of the discussions like we traditionally have had?
Yeah, the short answer to I think the meat of your question is if I've given any thought to it, and the short answer is no. I apologize for that. I'd be happy to have a conversation offline with everybody, including the newly electeds, to see how we can facilitate that. Just given the layout,
Right.
an immediate answer is absent from me right now, but I'd be willing to solicit input from my colleagues.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So with that, we'll dive right into the budget discussion questions. I tried to batch these by group to where it might make sense to, again, facilitate the discussion. So the first category is just general government. Joanne, naturally, I'm kind of looking at you on this one. So the first question is, please be prepared to provide more information surrounding the chart on page II, which suggests that expenditures are estimated to outpace revenues through 2026. This question came up from a couple of my colleagues. So I anticipate there may be some follow-up, but just with that very general topic, I don't know if you've got any information to provide.
I do, but before we kind of start with that first question, I just wanted to give a couple general comments.
Sure.
We saw a lot of the questions coming in, kind of looking at that year-to-year information, and just kind of want to take you back in time a little bit to discuss 2019 to where we are today, and kind of keep those in the back of your mind as you're looking at that comparative information. There's some complexities involved. You know, if you remember in 2019, we started with just a 1-month budget on the heels of the November 2018 income tax defeat at the polls. Multiple reductions were requested before a final budget was done. We had some public outpour on those reductions that were suggested. That created the community and city leadership group that wanted to put the income tax increase back on. That happened in May, got passed. We were already halfway through a year. Another budget came forward. During that time, we had a lot of key people leave the city, had a lame duck mayor. A lot of those positions weren't refilled. So when we brought that budget forward in July, those positions weren't considered at that time. So then, moving into 2020, going to be our great rebuild, re-strategize year, right? Full year of the 1% coming in, even though we were planning at a little bit reduced, and then the pandemic hit. We had to do various modelings. We saw through the models that we were going to lose some revenue. We immediately came with an appropriation reduction to council, seeing those resources weren't going to come in the way they were. So our plans to rebuild and re-strategize turned into crisis mode time. We have this pandemic to deal with. So then moving into 2021, again, a lot of uncertainties with where the pandemic was going. Still kept revenue low based on the modeling and all the uncertainties, but we were still able to make some progress moving forward into 2021, trying to rebuild, re-strategize, getting our departments right set with staffing. So now as we're moving into 2022, we're kind of seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, right? They think recovery is going to happen a little bit faster, not necessarily in 2022, but moving into 2023. We were able to increase what we had originally projected for 2022. In our first 5-year projection, we were still keeping revenue fairly low. We were able to pull that up based on how we're seeing 2021 play out and kind of projecting that to the end of the year. So I guess what I'm saying is that comparative information is important, but just kind of remembering the past and where we were in 2019 compared to where we are here as you're kind of looking at that information. So with that, I will move to the first question that talks about the 5-year forecast. So as soon as I printed that, that was pretty much outdated because of how everything is moving and going. On the revenue side, we still have some uncertainties with what's going to happen and what is normal. I think we're going to see those revenue trends kind of emerge as we move into 2022 and 2023. I also think we have a fully staffed development department. We have a planning department. Central Ohio is projected to grow. I think we're going to be able to capitalize on that. But I don't feel like there's enough information in either area to really make any big adjustments on the revenue side. So I think we are going to see some positives, might see a little bit of negative. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to play each other out. So when you're looking at that 5-year projection, it really is going into some more unknowns, but I think we're going to figure out what those are as we move through 2022 and into 2023. On the expenditure side, that assumes no employee turnover. It assumes no changes in the inflation rate, which we basically did a 3% across the board based on how inflation was trending at the time. If you look at inflation right now, that's not enough. But then they're also saying that that's going to slow, that's going to back down. We're going to see a decline there as the labor chains or the supply chain loosens up and the labor shortage corrects itself. That inflation is going to start pulling itself back down a little bit. Some think by the end of 2022. Others are thinking we probably won't see that until 2023. So I think on the expenditure side, again, there's probably going to be some movement, could be up, could be down. The good thing is, though, that is the one thing that we have control over, right? So if we start to see that revenue is trending in a bad way, we have control over those appropriations and we could come back with reductions. To figure out what those are now, I'd like to really see what revenue does first as we're going into the out years, especially into 2022. We're going to be keeping an eye on all that stuff very closely, and forecasting out will become a little bit better as we go, as we see those trends kind of start to emerge as we start moving through the years. At the end of the day, again, we have to follow policy, we have to follow state law. So the emergency reserve has to stay intact. We have to have at least 2 months of unreserved fund balance. We have to keep appropriations within resources, which is our planned revenue, and available on reserved fund balance. So we're going to have to make corrections as we're going through those years as we see things kind of unfold.
So Joanne, I just want to follow up based on what you're saying. just a quick clarifying question. What's the chief driver of the expenditure side in that 5-year forecast? And I do want to clarify even that statement a little bit further if I could. There's nominal, right, which clearly we can see based on the pretty bar chart that it's salaries and benefits, but then there's also rate of change. Like, so if one item is, albeit maybe a small portion, if it's growing really fast over that 5-year period, that could be the driver too. So I don't know if you've spent much time digging that deep into it. I'm just curious, what's the primary driver of perhaps that gap between revenues and expenditures?
Well, it's typically, on the expenditure side, salaries and benefits is our main driver as a service organization. Makes up roughly 67% of our expenditures, especially in the general fund. I mean, that's only operations now. We have a dedicated source for capital. We're no longer using it for capital spending. We do have some debt service in there, and we also have transfers to support, the bond retirement fund. So there are some outliers besides salaries and benefits, but that's really the main driver in the general fund. And on the revenue side, conversely, it's the income tax. It makes up 72% of our base. So to see kind of where that income tax is going to go, we have the refunds kind of happening. Not sure what that's going to look like. And we also have businesses that are continuing to change their models. We don't know how much more change is going to occur. We don't know, what's going to happen with the remote and the hybrid situations. So that's the main driver there is we know we're gonna have growth. We know we're gonna be able to capitalize on some of it. Is it enough to offset everything else that may happen with that revenue base?
Sure. So anything from council on this particular topic? Mr. Leesburg?
I mean, just the first two paragraphs, I guess, on page II. If I'm reading it correctly, we've got a general fund revenue of 26 million, and we've got expenditures of 27 million. So we're deficit spending.
We're asking to use 1.2 million of unreserved fund balance that is available.
So Jamie, I saw that too, and I understand right now this is the first question of our first meeting of the budget discussion, and some of the input from council will likely come at later meetings. But Joanne, perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong. Somewhere in this budget document, it talks about the freezing of personnel in 2020 and how there was a bit of a carryover. And I believe it said somewhere in the document, the ask is to use some of that carryover from the prior year and this year.
Correct. So it's more so for the 2021, how we're projecting the end of the year. So we originally had projected that we were going to have about a 10% decrease in revenue, mainly on the income tax side. As we're going through the third quarter and projecting out to the end of the year, it looks like instead we're going to have a 5% increase. So our original plan for 2021 was to use 1.8 million of unreserved fund balance. Instead, we're going to add a little over $500,000 to unreserved fund balance. So again, seeing how things could kind of swing and change in uncertain times with new items. So we will be adding to fund balance based on the most recent projection to the end of the year rather than using it as originally planned.
Thank you, Joanne. Anything further from council on this topic of I guess in essence, the 5-year outlook?
Right.
Yep. Ms.
I
McGregor?
guess, I know this will sound familiar, but I would prefer that we're not using from the reserve.
We're using, not from the reserve.
Okay,
We're using unreserved fund balance in accordance with the fund balance policy.
I'm sure it's within the policy. I don't question that. I would just prefer that we not do that. You seem to have a more optimistic outlook for next year than I do, and I think that there's a whole lot with supply chain and inflation is way higher than 3%, and I don't see anything going down. If you go to the grocery store, you see empty shelves everywhere. I think that this is not the year to spend more than we're bringing in.
Right, and we're still going to have 4 months twice what our policy says, so we're not going down to the bare minimum. Even if we use the 1.2, which we're not positive if we're going to use the 1.2, it just depends on how 2022 plays out. We still have 4 months of operating expenditures in unreserved fund balance available, which is twice the policy.
But most of what you said, the increase is going to be with salaries and benefits, and I think that's, that's something that's going to be ongoing. It's not something that, unless, if you decide to cut that back, that means people lose their jobs after a short time. And so I think I think I would just prefer not to do that. So, my opinion.
Anything further from council on this particular topic? Okay, then I'll move on to question 2 under general government. Joanne, on page 40, there's a general fund transfer out. Can you just clarify if all of that or a portion of that is for debt service?
So 302,800 is for debt service, and 239,000 is for anticipated leave payouts that come from the leave reserve fund.
Okay. And that's the portion of debt service that can't be paid from capital improvements fund?
The 302,800 is the transfer out, so that is all capital-related debt.
Oh, okay.
I believe we had this discussion last year. So we could legally pay for that capital debt out of the capital improvement fund. I chose to leave it as is because it would have to be the will of council if we wanted to pay for old debt with new dollars. So yes, that is all transfers out to the bond retirement fund for capital-related debt. It could technically come from the capital improvement fund, but we've opted to leave it in the general fund.
Okay, thank you. Anything from council on that topic? Nope, okay. Question 3 under general government. And I'll tip my hand here. This was a question that I had, and really the essence of the question is what, do we have any sort of sensitivity analysis is sort of the phrase that's used in my industry, that if that estimated 2% wage increase for public safety were 2.25 or 2.5, what is the ripple effect of the budget, and can you quantify that? So if hypothetically it's 2.5, do you have a ballpark estimate of perhaps what we might want to be prepared for as we move through these discussions?
Right, so basically what I did was I calculated a 1%.
Okay.
So that way, depending on, wherever we might land through negotiations, kind of gives you an idea of what each 1% increment will mean. And it's roughly 70,000 for base wages, retirement, Medicare, and workers' comp, but does not include any premium pay projections for like overtime. So this is just their solid base. So each 1% is roughly $70,000.
Okay. Thank you. Anything from council on that topic?
Well, typically, in other government places, there's going to 3 and 3.5%. I just want to point that out, that rather than 2. I know this is negotiations time, but that's what they're going to.
We're actually in negotiations now, so I would ask if we have any further discussion, perhaps we move into executive session on this topic, but
We didn't know that they were already doing this.
just started last week.
Well, then we shouldn't be talking about it. I think it should be 1%. No, just kidding. Gotta laugh at that one.
All right, just moving on here. Next on the list is, there's a couple under the topic of the mayor's office. These can be found on page 64 in the budget document. Just again, more of a placeholder than anything, but I'll turn it over to the mayor here. Please be prepared to discuss the drivers of salaries and benefits, line item increase from 2019 actual to the 2022 request, and any expected output or deliverables to be received from that cost increase. So I assume, Madam Mayor, you're in the spotlight now.
I appreciate that, thank you. And actually, with council's indulgence, there's a second question in that is very similar that speaks to the contract services line item as well. So I may, as I respond to these, actually answer a little bit of both of these at the same time because they very much are interrelated. So I appreciate the questions that were raised, and looking at them on page 64, I would expect you to ask questions, because just on paper, I would be asking questions myself. The budget book is 250-plus pages. There's a lot of information in there that explains what's going on, but you can't put everything, you can't always explain everything as fully as you would like to. So I do appreciate the opportunity to talk further with you. With regard to, and I'm really mostly going to speak to contract services first, because I think that then explains the staffing. With regard to contract services, I think the reason that you see an influx or an increase in what the mayor's office is now doing really is focused on communications and marketing. And I appreciate that you have asked for a comparison from 2019 to 2022. I know Director Burry referenced a little bit as to what was happening in 2019, and I'm going to ask to do the same if we just kind of take a moment and go back to where we were in 2022, or 2019, I should say. Back then, it was a very dire time financially for the city. We were budgeting on a 1 month at a time basis. We were uncertain as to what was going to happen in 2019. We weren't sure if there was going to be another issue on the ballot. If there was, if it was going to be a 2%, 2.5, whether it would pass, what we were looking at. At that time, I don't know if you all remember, but as of right the day after State of the City in March of 2019, we had no communications and marketing person. Our PIO left. The city administrator's position was defunded at the time. She ended up leaving. And the only other marketing person that we had, except for a part-time person, also left as well to take a job someplace else. So there was no communications, and there were no communications or marketing happening in 2019 at all. So what I did for you was I pulled up the last, actually dating back to 2018, which is up on the screen in front of you. And this is a breakdown of what is actually in the mayor's office. So MO stands for mayor's office. Those are my initiatives. CM stands for communications and marketing. So if you look at 2019, it is somewhat of an anomaly, given what I had just pointed out with there was no staffing in the mayor's office. In 2019, after March, after the first quarter, the mayor's office was comprised of the mayor, a full-time administrative assistant, and 1 part-time marketing digital coordinator who was working 30 to 35 hours per week. That was it. So you'll see the project line item of $101,000, $175,000. That's in the mayor's office. It's a 2019 actual spend. Those projects, I went back and looked up in the budget at the time. What that included were Zed Digital, website-related, facilities assessment. There was a division of police strategic business plan, some graphic design work, and then another marketing person who was working 20 hours or less per week. So that's pretty much as what was reflected in the 2019 actuals. If you go back to 2018, which is maybe a little bit better of a barometer, you see a little bit different spend there. Again, finances were limited at the time. We weren't putting a whole lot of money into marketing and communications because any money we did have we're trying to go into capital projects to keep whatever we had maintained. Not necessarily moving things forward, but just trying to maintain. So if you fast forward to, let's take a look at 2020, I would say that's also an anomaly here. We came in, the 2020 budget was one I inherited when I walked in the door. So the 2020 budget that you're looking at was what, again, was set when I took office January 2nd of 2020. If you look at our 2020 actuals, we had started to do, we planned a lot of great projects at the beginning of the year. A lot of them were paused because of COVID. Some were kicked into 2021. Some were started late in the end of 2020, carrying over into 2021. So the actuals for 2020 and the actuals for 2019, anomalies, I would say just throw those out. So let's take a look at 2021, the appropriations and the 2022 request. There is an increase, and the increase that you're seeing from the 2021 appropriated to the 2022 request really focuses on communications and marketing. And Kevin, if you could go to the line item that I have, and we can delve into that a little bit more. Thank you. So is this? Thank you. I should put my glasses on so I could see it better. So what you're seeing right on your screen right now is what was budgeted originally, 2021 budgeted in the mayor's office, which includes, actually that's just the mayor's office, and then the 2022 request. So the total, at least from the mayor's office initiatives, budgeted and appropriated in 2021 originally were $168,499. This year's request is $172,000. Initiatives for 2021 were the Creekside Visioning Plan, development marketing, the consultant, which included Gen 6, as well as some communications crisis communications kind of overlay that we had there. There's continuation of strategic planning, which we'd planned to start in April of 2020. That got pushed back to the end of 2020. We're still working on that. We are obviously a little bit behind schedule on that, but that is continuing to move forward. And actually that phase that you're looking at there will be just coming up within the next, either the end of this year or first quarter of next year. If you look at 2022 requests, the initiatives include diversity and inclusion. Last year I talked a lot about forming a diversity and inclusion task force. That still is on the table to move forward. We are actually creating a diversity and inclusion team internally and getting that in place before we roll that out externally. That'll be happening in 2022. And then sustainability initiatives. I have shared previously, we have created a sustainability advisory committee internally. Again, we'll be rolling that out externally, so we'll need a lot of communications around that in 2022 and going forward. Other initiatives, the gateway research and initial design, there has been a lot of communication around the gateways. That's been a CNA that has been around for many, many years. It's been discussed multiple times at Planning Commission this year, people wanting to know what are we doing with our gateways and our entryways into the city. And that really, it's the welcome mat on your city. We're trying to attract businesses and jobs and people here to take those jobs. You got to have a nice front door. So at least that is probably a drop in the bucket to what we actually need to reformat those entryways. If you might have seen, Hilliard just announced a huge project where they're redoing their gateways at their 270 Hilliard Rome Road. But this at least will start to get us started on what that design could look like. The consultant is Gen 6, who is already working on our long-term capital improvement plan. That will be continuing into 2022. We expect that to take probably 8 to 9 months within 2022. And she's also doing grant writing for us. She's already, just this year alone, has helped us with 2 grant submissions. She's working on a third. If we're able to get one of them, she will more than pay for herself. So that's part of what the consultant was in 2021 and will be carrying over into 2022. And then wayfinding design, starting to come up with what designs could look like consistently and uniformly throughout the city as we move forward. State of the City is the videography there at the end. Actually, this year's State of the City, if you remember, was by video. It was very well received by the public, both from a resident standpoint and outside the city of Gahanna. I underestimated the $4,500 that it was this year, and we actually used part of the community engagement funds because that was more of what it cost. So the budget for this year, or for 2022, reflects the more accurate cost for State of the City, as well as starting to do some videography in anticipation of Gahanna's 175th anniversary, which is in 2024. We have a lot of very senior members of our community who have lived here their entire lives, and we want to start creating some video stories for them to roll into that anniversary celebration. If you, Kevin, flip to the next, communication and marketing. Thank you very much. So this page is the contract services line items for the communications and marketing portion of the mayor's office budget. So if you look at 2021, what the initiatives were, the rollout of Uniquely Gahanna. The $14,400 that you see there was a very small portion of what that was. The lion's share of that publication actually rested in Parks and Recreation because that was supposed to be their programming publication for them. Looking ahead to what Parks and Recreation's needs are for next year, we're going to actually take a larger portion of that into the communications and marketing budget. We're also going to add pages to that publication. That Uniquely Gahanna has been extremely well received by residents. It's become a great information tool, not only to provide programming to residents for Parks and Recreation activities and events, but also to be able to highlight development news and news on service projects and business spotlights and resident spotlights. And we look to, again, add pages to that, which is reflected in the cost there. 2 new initiatives for 2022 would be the publication of an written annual report, one that is community-facing, and Joanne referred to it by her professional name, but I'm just going to call it a community-facing annual report. And as far as I'm concerned, and I think council will agree with me, we all talk about transparency and accountability. The more information we can give to our residents about how we are spending their dollars, the more accountable and the more transparent we are being. So to provide a written report to them that shows how their dollars were spent, to me, just enhances that level of communication even further. A new resident packet is also on the initiatives for 2022. That is something that has been long talked about, people wanting to do here so that as residents move into the city, they can get information on what the services are that are offered here, the organizations that they can become involved in, how to reach their council persons, how to contact the city staff, and just a plethora of information that we can share with our new residents. Otherwise, the additional spends for requests for 2022, brand implementation. We did do a brand refresh this year, which was how do we take the brand that rolled out in 2018 and make that workable for our community and beyond, something that actually resonates with the community. And we have, I think, a great plan in place for how that, taking all of that wonderful information that was gathered and what was developed and kind of twisting that just a little bit and making that work for us, and having the brand implementation now throughout the city so that it is consistent in every piece of written material that you get, everything from our forms to the scorecard at the golf club to brochures that go out for the water bill inserts and all of the multiple publications, making sure that that branding is consistent throughout all departments, as well as council communications is going to be a priority for us. And then photography and videography as well. Development is, we have a development team now. For the first time in a long time, we have a very experienced, highly aggressive team that is trying to do its best to attract jobs and businesses here and also retain and build upon and support the existing businesses are here. That is something that we have not done in a really long time. Donato's is headquartered here. They have 3 businesses located here. We should be publicizing them. We should be promoting them. Tom Kraus, in a conversation that I had with him last year, said, you should be using us to tell your story. So we've started to do that. We've started to promote the businesses that have found value in investing in our city, and we need to continue to do that. Because if we want to drive jobs here, if we want to drive businesses here, we have to tell the story to people who live outside of Gahanna. And I'm going to look at Councilman Renner and quote him from, I think, early first quarter of 2020 when he said, and I believe this was the word you used, Councilman Renner, but the city really sucks at telling its story. And we have for a really long time. So what you're seeing in this budget is our efforts to change that, not only to enhance our communications with our residents through Gov Delivery, through Uniquely Gahanna and all of the things that we're doing, but also to then communicate beyond Gahanna to let people know that Gahanna is relevant, that we are here. And whether we want to admit it or not, we have fallen off the radar outside of the city of Gahanna. We need to be back on the radar with people. And I will share, there was I think I mentioned this just a couple weeks ago, there was a podcast for Columbus Business First, and they were talking, it was a housing podcast. And about halfway through, they started talking about Gahanna. And they made the comment that things are happening in Gahanna. Well, the reason they know that is because we're starting to put money behind selling that message. For 2020, there really wasn't a whole lot of communication for us to do because it was all about COVID, and it was about the free methods of advertising and communication that we had. It was Gov Delivery, or Gahanna.gov, and social media. It was about getting information into the hands of our residents on how to stay safe. In 2021, we started to focus on the paid advertisement, the paid media placement that we need to have. Things like this. You all see this on your desk. This was one of the advertising pieces that we did. It was an insert in Columbus Monthly that just came out. This was a piece we did, Gahanna did about 5 years ago. And I remember encouraging the city to do it back then because I thought Gahanna had a great story to tell. And this year we did not want to miss this opportunity to participate in this. So when you get a chance to look at this later tonight, it tells a wonderful story of Gahanna, the development that's happening, the opportunities that are here, the partnerships that exist within the city. And I know I'm kind of giving you a very high-level scope of contract services items, but hopefully that gives you a flavor for what the contract services line items are and how that relates to 2019, even 2018 forward. How that relates to staffing. Kevin, if you could put up the staffing graphic, please. I mentioned earlier how back in 2019, that very tumultuous time in the city's history, we had a lot of departures from the city. The mayor's office had, at least for 3/4 of the year, again, mayor, administrative assistant, and a part-time marketing coordinator. Kev, I'm tap dancing, dude. There you go. All right. In 2020, when I took office, the first 3 positions remained. We added a full-time communications manager and a full-time marketing manager, really bringing us back up to staff for where we would have been in 2019. In 2021, the only change that we made was we moved the HR director from the HR budget into the mayor's office with the title of Department of Administrative Services. So the budget for my office increased, but the HR budget went down. And in the role of Director of Administrative Services, Director Vollmer now oversees HR, IT, and Finance, bringing those all under one collective umbrella. And ensuring consistency in operations, streamlining of operations, and she's also overseeing many of the internal projects that we have, such as the facilities assessment, the strategic planning, and a few other kind of citywide internal projects that we're working on. So that's what she does in that role. Another position that you had appropriated last year, approved it in the budget, was a part-time community liaison. This time last year when we were having budget discussions, I expressed to you the need to really have a connectivity between City Hall, your office, my office, and the community, and having a person to be out there in the role of a community liaison to interact with the nonprofit groups and the organizations that were out there. As it turned out, I never filled that position because it took me longer to get a development director. It took me a long time, but I finally got the one I wanted, Nate Strum. And then we built out the team, and that didn't happen really until August of this year. And at that point, we were already preparing the budget for this year. So it actually caused me to take a step back and look at what we were working on, what projects we have coming up from a communications and marketing standpoint, and how do we best keep up with all of the work that needs to be done. We have a tremendous increase in the amount of capital projects that are happening because of issue 12. The sidewalk program, council started discussions on back in, I think, 16 or 17. That is rolling out now. That is going to take a tremendous amount of communications with the residents, and EMH&T will be preparing a large part of that, but our office still needs to be involved in that to make sure that our residents are informed as to what they can and should be expecting with that. The street program, again, a lot of communications with that, given the extent with which that is happening. The development department with their marketing needs and what they're doing in terms of support. Parks and Recs programming is now returning back to pre-pandemic levels. There's going to be a lot of need for communications there. So with that, in 2022, mayor remains the same, administrative assistant. The part-time marketing social media coordinator I referenced had been working, this year working 35 hours per week. I would just like to move her to 40 hours per week. It's an additional 5 hours per week. It's about 260 hours overall for the entire year. She already is receiving benefits, so there's no change to benefits with that. It would just be pay for an additional 260 hours worth of work for the entire year. Communications manager position remains, marketing manager position remains, the DAS position remains, and instead of doing a part-time community liaison, I would like to just make that a full-time position that helps support the communication efforts that we have, given this significant increase in basically in work that we have within the city. And I know our communications manager, Ms. Wester, is sitting here. Is there anything, Karen, that I have missed or that you would like to add? Nope, did I miss anything? All right. So with that, I will stop rambling and let you ask questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know that was a lot of information, council members. I just have one follow-up, and doesn't necessarily have to be covered right this second. An email would be fine.
Sure.
But Madam Mayor, if you could, amongst those various items that were looked to be one-time versus those that look to be continuing, would you mind breaking those out with the dollars associated with them? And again, doesn't have to be now. Follow-up email anytime in the next week and a half will be just fine.
So can you help me just with regard to one-time versus recurring?
Well,
So the
I think
strategic
that-
plan would have several phases to it, but once we do it, it's a one-time project. So,
Anything, I guess, that is one-time this year. So
okay.
I'm going to take just a stab in the dark and assume that the capital improvement plan is going to be one time. So that's a
That would be one
$70,000 charge that will occur in 2022 that we would likely not see recurring in '23 or '24.
Correct.
So I just use that as an example. I'm just trying to wrap my head around how those expenses may fluctuate in the
Sure.
in the
I
out years.
can absolutely, I'll send an email to clarify.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anything from council on essentially the mayor's office, either contract services or staffing personnel?
Well, there's quite a few things you said there, and you said them very quickly.
Sorry.
And if you know, we cannot read that very well. At least I can't read it very well from here. So if
I'm
you
happy to
have-
send it to you in an email.
Thank you, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely. Everything that I shared, I'll send to you in an email.
Thank you, Mayor. Budgets are so important, you know, and I believe that we need to be careful with the use of taxpayer dollars.
I agree.
And that is why I really want to know the why you're doing the things and whatever. And if you and I really feel that there is not the necessity. I'm trying to figure out why I feel that way. The necessity to have all these employees coming in, new employees coming in. Our census has not grown, really. You know, we've seen it. We want to make it bigger than that, but it's not. And it doesn't need to have all those employees because we haven't really grown in our census. So in moving forward, and we should be grateful for our Economic Development Department. They're doing a wonderful time. They have their growth and they're bringing good development to our community, and we thank them for that. This is working. And how many members are there in the Development Department? Economic Development
There's 3.
Department. 3. They're doing extremely well, and you're going to add one more, was it? Did I get that wrong?
To development?
Not to development? Okay.
No.
I might have it wrong, okay. The police, they should get their 60 people. That's the most important thing we do, safety. And indeed, I'm all for everything they want, they should be able to get, because people are telling to defund them, people are doing this, and we have a wonderful community, and I do believe that they deserve to have the things they need to make us safe. The only thing that's really important, that and roads. The other divisions, I'm just getting, again, I was reading some of the things here in the Office of the Mayor when the hiring one of public information officers and moving people around. I really was wondering how were we able to give benefits to somebody who was at 35 hours? Is 35 hours good? Can you answer that?
Yeah, so that was part of the Affordable Care Act, that we have to look at how many hours over a year, and where we consider individuals full-time is not what is considered eligible for benefits under the Affordable Care Act. So if they're working on average more than 30 hours per week, they are eligible for
Okay.
benefits, and we do have to offer it to them.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. See, that's the whys and the whats and why, et cetera. And we better have a good reason to do these things.
Absolutely.
Because when we passed the tax, it was so beautiful because it has specifics in it. And I think we need specifics in what we're doing. And again, I just, we've had many things renamed, okay? And so how are these things going to benefit the community? And again, we have to be careful with how we spend the taxpayers' money.
I don't disagree with you, Councilwoman. Certainly the passage of issue 12 is part of the reason why I'm asking basically to add another half person. So we approved a part-time position last year that was not filled. I'd like to just make that a full-time position this year. But with the amount of projects that we now have to do, I mean, for many years, the city was staffed here with a project level that was here. Now we have a project level that's here, and our staffing level is still here. So in order to have the amount of people to do the amount of work that's necessary, in order to make these projects actually happen, we have to add staff. We can't engage with the community, we can't move projects forward unless we actually have the staff to be able to do that. We have streamlined a lot of communications into now this communications and marketing division. They are responsible to support every department in this city. So some of the new things that they do that had not done previously is the publication of the police's annual report, which is an extensive 80-plus page document filled with data and metrics and photographs that requires content editing and writing so that we can get that out to our residents and be transparent and accountable for our division of police and their operations. We now do a monthly civic association bulletin that the police department also puts out, that our communications and marketing department works with them to get that out as well. Again, providing data metrics on what the safety operations are with the city. They do a weekly newsletter for senior centers. They do a city newsletter. They do a Parks and Recreation monthly newsletter. The Uniquely Gahanna magazine itself requires extensive time to do. Again, a communications tool. I mean, the list goes on in terms of the brand new communication tools that we now do, not to mention the engagement with residents on social media. The amount of time that it takes when there's a question that's raised by a resident on social media that comes through either on a post or in a private message on Facebook or that comes through via an email or a phone call takes a great deal of time. And it's not just one person who has to answer that. A lot of times it's the communications manager having to call the director of public service or the director of development or the finance director to get the background on the question so that it can be answered. So all of these things that I've outlined, it's hard to go very much into detail on everything because I've already rambled for a long time, but all of those things that we've identified and that are in there are critical to keeping communication, accountability, and transparency with all of our residents so that they know what's going on and we can keep that lines of communication open with them, because I think for many years that it just wasn't a priority for the city, and it for whatever reason it was, whether it was because we did not have the money to do it, or we didn't have the staff to do it, whatever it was, it is a priority for me. It's a priority to build upon the communications that we have with our residents and create that relationship with them so that we can tell them what's going on here. And then they know the work that you're doing and the work that we're doing on their behalf, because I agree with you. How we spend their dollars is absolutely critical. They work hard for their dollars. I work hard for my dollars. I want to make sure that whatever we're doing to spend them and invest them back in our city is something that they're going to get the benefit out of, and I believe that that's the case with this.
I hope you can do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Leesburg, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, Kevin, could you go back to that first slide? I know the mayor's going to provide them to us, but I just wanted to take a look at that if I could. Yeah, the 2018 to 2022 comparison. Yeah, that's the one. Thank you.
Want
That
me
was
to get
it?
my
Just-
camera out and make a picture?
I think the mayor's going to send the exhibits to all of us.
What's that?
I think the mayor's going to send the exhibits to all of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So no input? I just want to make sure.
No, I'm good. I just want to do a little math in my head. Okay. I was missing a number.
Oh, you're
Okay.
going to send them to us?
Yeah, the mayor will.
Oh,
Yep.
Did you say that?
Anybody else on this side? No? Okay. Thank you for that. I will just say I appreciate the exhibits, and I think the exhibits are a product of this process that we initiated last year, where, again, it allows the administration to do a little bit of homework in advance of the committee meetings. I'll move to the next line item, though I don't see Miranda out there, but under Human Resources, just generally speaking, be prepared to discuss the necessity for the 2021 to 22 salaries and benefits increase year over year in contract services. I'm assuming we'll wait for Miranda to return.
Yes, she is currently at the National Public Employees Relation something, blah, 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 blah. It's a conference, it's the national conference that had been scheduled actually many months ago. So she will be back and be prepared to address that at the next committee meeting.
Okay, I'll be sure to have it on the list just as a prompt for the next time. So moving on to the final section, Parks and Recreation. This was one that I had received. It was a question that I had, is also one that I received from some other members of council. And I think, again, going back to my prior statement, a lot of what is on this list is an amalgamation of what several people are thinking. I'm just wondering, can the administration provide sort of a high-level overview of the change from, we have several part-time individuals in 2019, fewer of them in 20, and then we get into more of a full-time staffing. So is there a nice way to kind of encapsulate how that works within the city's operations?
Yeah, I could start it, and then Stephanie could add anything additional on. But for the first part of it is just, noting on page 85, there is the note that a lot of the decrease in the part-time and seasonals because of the movement to a lot of activities to the special funds. So that chart just represents what we're paying out of the general fund.
Okay.
It's not all of their staff. It's just the general fund only. And then as far as what is accounted for in the general fund, there was an operational change for the park facilities. Basically, the turnover in the part-time staff, continued training, it just the cost was getting too costly and it was becoming very inefficient. We also had part-time postings that nobody was applying for. So we looked at kind of what the part-time staffing level was, and if we had consistency with full-time staff and we could maintain them for a longer period of time, it would make the operations much more efficient and less costly. So if you look at the part-time and look at the team member category and the parks coordinator categories, you'll see those decline as we move into 2020, and then you'll see the full-time maintenance workers increase. So there was a decrease of, I think, 14 in that part-time category, and then just an increase of 6 full-time. They calculated to be cost neutral just on the salaries and benefits side, but really a savings when you look at the HR piece of it and the constant advertising and the constant training with that turnover with the part-timers.
Yeah. Councilwoman Bowers?
Joanne, I'm sorry, I might have not understood, but who's going to be lifeguarding at the pools in the summers? I'm sorry. That's simple.
Special fund, that particular page is only what's being funded out of the general fund. So if we don't have any staffing tables in the special revenue funds, but I could add that as an addition add, or if you'd like to see those staffing tables for the Parks and Recreation Fund, I could put one together for you and send it out.
That would be fantastic. And can you, one more time, why is it that it won't be out of the general fund, but it will be out of the special fund?
Because we're funding the pools, camps, the senior center, golf course are all being funded out of the special revenue fund now.
With the issue $12?
Correct.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Anything further from council on the topic of page 85, part-time versus full-time? Okay, well, we'll move on. Continuing with Parks and Recreation on page 117, I believe there is reference to Price Road programming costs and also a Parks and Recreation master plan refresh. Generally speaking, can you just broadly comment on how these two align and how it might support the capital improvement request of essentially $200,000?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So the programming costs for Price Road are directly related to independent contracting. You'll have to excuse my voice here. So we use independent contractors in order to expand services. Our recreation coordinators do implement programming, but in order for us to expand what we offer with experts, we do initiate contracts with those contractors. The agreement is typically a 70-30 split, so the contractors will receive 70% of the participation cost of the resident fee, and the city retains 30%. So the more contractors we have, the more contract services we would spend, but then also you would see a reflection of the revenue as well. So that does correlate directly with the contract services in Price Road House. As far as the master plan, the Parks and Recreation Department has not had an updated master plan, including capital projects since 2006. So we are due for a refresh. The refresh will include a needs assessment, public involvement, It will be a research from local, state, and national trends, as well as a program and park inventory assessment. So with that, it'll create an actual strategic action plan for just not only operations, our existing facilities, but also our capital improvements for the next 10 years. The Price Roadhouse, which we are also referring to as the Exploration Center, it's a sustainable solution to an ongoing problem. We've had consistent issues with indoor programmable space, also lack of adequate space for community groups to meet. So although this is, of course, not a solution to the need of a community recreation center, it is something that we have the ability to do now and will be sustainable even in coordination with a recreation center. The facility will be a hub to programs such as STEM, outdoor education, cultural arts, homeschool programming, and so on. We've actually just recently partnered with Gahanna Lincoln, Chef Naz, as well as New Albany to do some adventure programming. So we're teaching students about natural resources, ecosystems, and of course conservation. So this facility will only expand the availability for us to serve this type of programming. The Rapid 5 project, which we participated in, really helped solidify the desire to move forward with this project. Rapid 5, the overall vision of that project was to really activate our waterways and create a purposeful reason for people to participate as a region to natural spaces in our trails. The Price Roadhouse, or the Exploration Center, is connected into 50 acres of parkland, which, as the community park is developed, the Exploration Center will only enhance that park, as it's connected directly into the Central Ohio Greenways and has a direct correlation or a direct relationship to the Big Walnut Creek. We have submitted grants. Mayor had alluded previously that some grant applications have been submitted. We just submitted last week for the state capital funding, and later this month we're also submitting for this project for the land and water conservation. So there's a lot of positive momentum around this project, and I think it'll be something we all can be very proud of.
Thank you.
What's
Yeah,
the
Mrs.
other
McGregor.
name you're calling that?
We call it, and it's not officially named this, so I don't want to
I
steal
couldn't
anybody's
understand the
thunder, but
word.
I apologize. I don't typically sound like this. It is just yeah. I'm calling it the Exploration Center.
Exploration?
Exploration Center.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a nature center because it won't be exclusive nature programming, but a lot of the activities that will be going on there will be adventure, outdoor education, that type of thing.
I was hearing expiration, and I'm like, I don't know.
Not expiring, exploring, adventure. Excuse my nasal. It probably sounds terrible. I apologize.
It might be my hearing, so just.
Director Farrell, can you also speak to the outside organizations that have expressed support for this project?
Yeah, so gaining letters of support was not an issue for this project. So of course the Parks and Recreation Foundation and the Parks and Recreation Board are in full support of moving forward with this. We also had Franklin County Soil and Water express interest. We do partner with them for programming, as well as the schools that have participated with us. So Shep Nazarene, Gahanna Lincoln, Royal Manor. There's actually an article that exists for the adventure days that we partnered with Royal Manor, which we were able to have a day with the third grade class and teach them about water quality, and they got a tour of the Arboretum. But the partnership with the schools is something that we want to continue to expand upon, so it actually could be part of their curriculum as outdoor education.
Thank you. I do want to clarify the question, I guess, as I interpreted it when I received it, was on page 53, there's reference to these list of things that are going to be carried forward via contract services, again, one of which is this master plan refresh. And then on page 117, there's an expenditure, to essentially remodel or rehab the Price Roadhouse or the Exploration Center. Mm-hmm. Is there a reasonable belief that the master plan will include that type of programming? So I just want to, again, I think it's kind of a chicken or the egg type question.
No, that's a great question. So in 2006, as I mentioned before, we did receive a fully comprehensive plan. And one of the top 5 needs or wants from the community, a nature center or indoor programming space was part of the top 5. In 2015, there was also a refresh. I did not include that in my statement previously because it did not include capital projects, but it did include operations. And even in the 2015 refresh, indoor space, including a nature center, was also part of the need from the community. So the need for indoor programmable space is not going away. We have not solved that problem. So again, this is a step in the right direction. We're able to utilize this space that exists, that has sound structure, and able to use it for something purposeful instead of an eyesore. So I do believe that this refresh will include the use and the sustainable use of this facility.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from council on the topic of Parks and Recreation contract services or the Exploration Center?
I think just a real quick clarification, and Director, I think that this is probably just a softball, but the item recreation programming increases for Price Road anticipated to open in the fall, that's on number 53. That will be offset by the revenue that it actually generates,
That's
right?
correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anything further? Okay, well, thus concludes finance. I'll send an email out just reminding, requesting additional questions, and we'll take this up in the weeks ahead. So thank you to staff and to the mayor and council colleagues. Have a good evening.